Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When civil attorney Matt Hudson left for a quiet mountain getaway, he never imagined he'd return to ashes. His family's boathouse, a legacy untouched for decades, was gone. But this wasn't an accident. It was a message, and Matt was ready to burn the truth into the light. When we finally hit the mountain pass into Colorado, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get 2 weeks without thinking about contracts, nuisance claims, or HOA board members trying to annex everything in sight. My name's Matt Hudson. I'm 39, a civil attorney by trade, and a third-generation owner of a quiet little lakeside boathouse my grandfather built with his own 2 hands back in 1965. That place isn't just real estate to me. It's blood, legacy, and the scent of sun-baked cedar soaked into every floorboard. Before we left, I shut down everything. Electricity, off. Propane tank, locked. Windows, sealed. Security system, running off an independent battery pack, pinging footage straight to my cloud server. My wife rolled her eyes at the level of preparation. I told her, I don't trust the lake people in pressed polos and fake authority. She laughed. I meant it. The boathouse sat just beyond the reach of the Greystone Shores HOA, a fact they hated. They'd tried to rope us in more than once. I had the legal letters and certified refusals to prove it. We were 5 days into our vacation, up in the pines, no cell service, no emails, just campfires, and my daughter trying to convince me marshmallows were a food group. Then we reached a ridge with signal, and the messages flooded in. Voicemails, missed calls, a dozen texts, one from Jake, my neighbor across the lake. All it said was, "Call me. It's bad. Your boathouse is gone." I froze. My wife went pale before I could say a word. I called. Jake picked up on the first ring. He sounded shaken. "Matt, it burned down. All of it. It's just ash now." The fire department came and left. Karen from the HOA was there, said something about faulty wiring or maybe a lightning strike. Pause. "Matt, the sky's been clear for a week." That drive back was silent. My kids didn't understand why Dad suddenly turned into a statue. My wife just held my hand and didn't ask. All I saw in my mind was smoke curling up from memories. The porch swing Grandpa built, the boat he lacquered every spring, the family photos nailed crooked on the wall, and standing over the ruins, smiling through fake sympathy, was going to be Karen. I already knew it. By the time I pulled up to the lake, the sun was just starting to sink behind the treetops, casting long shadows over what used to be my family's retreat. The air still smelled like scorched timber and wet ash. I parked at the edge of the gravel path and just stared. Nothing remained of the boathouse but a blackened concrete foundation and a few twisted metal beams. My stomach sank like a stone. That building had stood for nearly 60 years. Now it looked like it had never existed at all. I stepped out slowly, gravel crunching under my boots. As I got closer, I could see charred remnants, a corner of the old canoe, the melted outline of the kitchen sink, pieces of glass embedded in the dirt like frozen tears. And then I heard it, the distinct sound of someone clearing their throat with performative concern. "Matt, oh my God, I am so sorry." I turned. There she was, Karen. Mid-50s, blonde helmet of hair, HOA badge clipped to her pristine golf vest like she was a federal agent instead of the queen of lawn citations. She stood there with arms folded, flanked by 2 HOA board members who looked like they'd never lifted anything heavier than a clipboard. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Her smirk did all the talking. "We don't know what happened," she said, eyes scanning the wreck like she was appraising damage to a shed, not someone's family legacy. The fire chief mentioned maybe a lightning strike or faulty old wiring. You know how these historic structures can be. I raised an eyebrow. "Clear skies for 7 straight days, Karen." She blinked just once, but her smile didn't crack. "Well, weather can be tricky. Dry heat, wind, embers. Accidents happen. Sure, accidents happen, but not ones that leave symmetrical burn lines and the faint, unmistakable smell of gasoline. I'd handled enough property cases to know the difference between an act of God and an act of cowardice. I crouched by the remains, pretending to examine what was left of the foundation. The wood hadn't splintered. It had collapsed inward, controlled, purposeful. There were strange chemical residues along the edges. Some of the concrete still had a chalky pale residue, not from soot, more like foam insulation. I spotted a scorched plastic ring embedded in the dirt, part of a fuel cap. Karen kept talking behind me, but I'd tuned her out. I stepped back, scanned the perimeter. The cameras, the ones I'd mounted under the eaves, were gone, but not shattered, just cleanly removed. No scorch marks, no melted plastic, like someone had unplugged them before the fire. I straightened up, turned to face her. Did the fire chief leave a report? She gave me that fake surprised blink again. Oh, I'm sure they will. We just wanted to express our condolences. And, of course, we'll do everything we can to support your recovery. Then, quieter, with a calculated tilt of her head, maybe this is a good opportunity to revisit community integration. The lakefront belongs to everyone, after all. I didn't answer. I just smiled, because now I knew. This wasn't a tragedy. This was a message. The second I got back home, I went straight to my office, bypassing the suitcase still half unpacked on the floor. My hands were still covered in fine gray ash, but I didn't care. I powered up my desktop, logged into the camera system's backend, and prayed the cloud archive had survived whatever sleight of hand Karen and her goons had pulled at the lake. Thankfully, it had. The feed had gone dead at exactly 3:12 a.m. the night before the fire, not because of power loss, but a remote deactivation, manual shutdown, and right before that, motion triggers. Two separate human shapes moving toward the boathouse from the trailhead near the public walking path. One of them carried something bulky. The image was grainy, but under the moonlight, I could make out the reflection of a silver canister. Then another flash, just for a second, of what looked like a shoulder patch. I paused, zoomed. There it was, the faint, unmistakable outline of the Greystone Shores HOA logo. My stomach turned. This wasn't carelessness or weather. This was coordinated. And then I remembered the letter. A month before we left for vacation, I'd received a formal request from the HOA, signed by none other than Karen herself, proposing an expansion of communal shoreline access for the benefit of all residents. A thinly veiled land grab, really. The proposal included rough sketches of new dock installations that would cut directly across my private shoreline. I'd declined immediately, through a notarized letter no less. I'd even CC'd the county clerk and our district council. I wasn't subtle. I pulled the file back up. Their wording had been so smug. We are confident Mr. Hudson will see the wisdom in collaborative land use that benefits the broader Greystone community. Yeah, I saw the wisdom, all right. And I torched it with legal precision. Apparently, that didn't go over too well. The next hour I spent poring over every document I had, land deeds, zoning maps, historic preservation papers, and one thing was crystal clear. The boathouse sat outside HOA jurisdiction. Every attempt they'd made to annex it over the years had failed. Legally, they had no authority. But no authority doesn't mean much to people who act like they're the law. Just before midnight, I called a contact of mine, Carla Redding, a cybersecurity analyst who moonlit as my go-to for digital forensics. I told her I needed a clean extraction of that 3:12 a.m. footage and the server logs. She agreed, no questions asked. You think someone torched your property? She asked. I don't think, I replied. I'm starting to know. As I ended the call, I turned back to the photo of the figure with the canister. The reflection off the metal, the way he hunched like he knew he shouldn't be there. This wasn't rogue behavior. This was a hit job. HOA style. The next morning, I drove back out to the lake. I didn't care that the air still reeked of damp soot, or that the wind carried the faint crackle of burnt leaves like ghosts refusing to leave. I needed answers. Not theories, not speculation, but names and faces. And I had a hunch where to start. Across the water, barely visible through the mist, floated an old pontoon boat anchored just offshore. It hadn't moved in years. It belonged to Henry Dawson, retired Coast Guard, amateur photographer, and full-time crank with a penchant for watching everything that happened on this lake through a pair of war-era binoculars. If anyone saw something, it was him. I borrowed Jake's kayak and paddled over. Henry was sitting on a folding chair at the edge of the deck, sipping something out of a chipped mug and pretending not to notice me until I was close enough to smell the coffee. "Morning," he grunted, not looking up. "Morning, Henry. I need to ask you something." He lowered the mug and squinted at me. "About your place, huh?" I nodded. He gestured for me to tie off and climb aboard. The second I did, he reached under his chair and pulled out a beat-up camera bag. From it, he slid a small memory card between two fingers and handed it to me like a priest passing over contraband communion. "Took these Thursday morning," he said. Didn't think anything of it until I saw the smoke Saturday. I plugged the card into my phone, heart pounding. The photos weren't high resolution, but they were sharp enough. A white utility van with the HOA logo parked awkwardly at the trailhead near my dock. 3 men in neon safety vests, one of them suspiciously muscular, the kind of guy who didn't do landscaping so much as enforce it. And one photo, time-stamped 5:42 a.m., showed 2 of them hauling what looked like chemical drums down toward the tree line. "You know these guys?" I asked. Henry shrugged. "Seen them before. They were spraying weeds last month near the HOA clubhouse. One of them's got a snake tattoo on his neck." My pulse kicked up a notch. That detail matched the figure from the grainy night footage, a dark splotch on the man's neck, just visible when he turned toward the camera. I was getting closer. As I prepared to leave, Henry stopped me. "Matt, they were creeping. Didn't act like they belonged. That ain't normal cleanup. That was something else." Back on land, I followed the path down to where the van had been. The dirt was still soft from rain 2 nights earlier, and deep tire ruts cut clean through the grass, leading straight to a flattened area behind the trees. I knelt and took pictures of the tread, fresh, heavy-duty, likely dual-wheel, utility vehicle, probably the same one from Henry's shots. Then I noticed something half buried in the mud, a torn scrap of a receipt. I carefully peeled it free. The logo was faded, but legible. Greenleaf Environmental Services. The same landscaping company listed in Karen's previous newsletters as HOA's exclusive outdoor partner, and now their footprint was all over my crime scene. I stood up slowly, phone still recording, and looked out over the water. I wasn't chasing shadows anymore. I had time codes, I had photos, I had a witness, and most importantly, I had a target. 3 days after I started poking around, I got a letter. Certified mail, gold HOA seal, cream-colored envelope, the kind of paper that smells like an overpriced conference room, and legally dubious intentions. I opened it over my kitchen counter with a steak knife, half expecting a lawsuit or a cease and desist. Instead, it was something worse, a gesture of compassion. Inside was a formal expression of sympathy from the Greystone Shores HOA board, signed naturally by Karen, along with a proactive offer of $5,000 to assist with recovery and cleanup of the regrettable incident involving the structure formerly located on Parcel B Lakeside. They didn't even call it my home, just the structure. The check was stapled to a release form, a waiver of future claims related to the incident. Classic. They were trying to buy silence at wholesale price. $5,000 for a decades-old family boathouse that they damn well knew they had a hand in torching. I didn't respond. Instead, I framed the letter, check and all, and set it on my bookshelf. Evidence. Then I waited. It took exactly 48 hours for Karen to appear in person. She arrived in a white SUV that probably cost more than most people's homes. She stepped out in tennis whites despite the fact that it was 8 a.m. and the nearest court was a mile away. This was theater. She even brought backup. Her HOA legal advisor, a man who looked like someone photoshopped a tie onto a mannequin and called it a lawyer. "Matt," she said with that politician's smile. "So glad we could speak face to face." I leaned against the porch post and crossed my arms. Is this an ambush or just a poorly dressed sales pitch? Karen's smile faltered just slightly. "We simply want to move forward. The community is hurting, and we believe unity is better than division. Is that what you call burning down private property now? A unifying experience?" Her lawyer cleared his throat like that was going to change the weather. "Mr. Hudson, this is not an admission of guilt, merely a gesture of goodwill. You know how easily electrical faults—" "There was no power running to the structure," I cut in. "And unless Greystone's electricians are using gasoline now, I think we can both agree it wasn't accidental." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Let's not make this adversarial. There's no need for escalation. We're offering compensation and, frankly, a way to reintegrate into the community. A path forward. By reintegration, you mean folding my property into your HOA like I'm the last slice of cake at a birthday party." She didn't answer. But then she said something that made my skin crawl. "You have to admit, Matt, one lone parcel jutting out of HOA territory. It disrupts continuity. The shoreline is meant to be shared." There it was. Not a slip of the tongue. A window into intent. She wasn't sorry. She was annoyed that I had refused to play along. This wasn't an accident. This was design. I let the silence hang. Karen looked around like she expected applause. Her lawyer started to reach into his folder again, and I raised a hand to stop him. "We're done here," I said. "And, just so we're clear, any further contact should go through my attorney." "You're an attorney," she said. "Exactly," I replied. "So, I'll bury you with a smile." Karen left without another word, but I caught the way she muttered something to her lawyer as they walked back to the SUV. Her voice was low, but not low enough. Should have just handled it the first time. I was already recording. After Karen's visit, I spent the rest of the afternoon in my office, surrounded by folders so old they still smelled like my grandfather's study. I'd kept every legal document relating to the property since the day he left it to me. Land surveys, property tax records, zoning designations, and, most importantly, the original deed transfer from 1971. I opened it slowly, careful with the creased paper, and there it was in black ink. Designation: historic family recreational structure. Demolition, modification, or destruction by third parties strictly prohibited without expressed written consent of familial owner or ruling by municipal court. It was more than a deed. It was a shield. I scanned the document, ran OCR on it, and printed 3 certified copies. One for the county recorder, one for my lawyer, and one for the courtroom I was now determined to walk into. Next, I reviewed the municipal zoning files. The Boathouse lot, officially recorded as Parcel B, was clearly listed as private property outside of HOA boundaries. However, I also found a footnote in a recent planning document. Parcel B had been listed under a proposed future integration plan submitted by Greystone Shores HOA just 2 months prior. Their note read, "Pending property owner cooperation." Pending, voluntary, not binding. They knew they didn't have legal standing, so they were building a narrative, one they probably hoped would become reality if they just erased the obstacle. In this case, me. Then came the kicker. I checked the inspection reports and property access logs for the last quarter. HOA maintenance crews had never, not once, received approved access to my land. But in the HOA's latest board minutes, which I'd obtained through a mutual contact, Karen had made a curious remark. "The issue with Parcel B will be resolved by the end of the summer, one way or another." Cute. I compiled everything. The deed, zoning maps, access logs, Karen's recorded comment, the video of her handled it the first time, muttering, and the grainy photos from Henry's camera. Then I called Gina. Gina Bentley wasn't just my attorney. She was the legal equivalent of a surgical airstrike. We'd gone to law school together. She now handled high-level civil suits and took personal pleasure in dismantling bureaucratic overreach. I gave her the whole download. "You've got them cold," she said after 5 minutes. "And if they tried to sidestep the protected status on your deed, that's criminal mischief minimum, possibly malicious destruction of private property. And if they coordinated it through that landscaping company." "They did," I said. "I have photos, tire tracks, timestamps, and I'm 90% sure the guy on the footage is one of their regular contractors." She whistled. "Then we're going nuclear." We filed 2 things the next morning: a civil suit for damages, including emotional distress and destruction of historical property, and a formal complaint with the county prosecutor's office for criminal investigation into arson and conspiracy. By that evening, the sheriff's department had a full file in hand, complete with my affidavit and all attached documentation. Now, it wasn't just about a boathouse anymore. It was about HOA overreach, malicious intent, and violating protected private land. Karen hadn't just poked the bear. She'd set his damn forest on fire. It started with an envelope. No return address, no postmark. Just left on my doorstep one evening, tucked behind a potted plant, like some deranged secret admirer's calling card. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed in bold black font. "You're digging too deep. Walk away before you get burned again." I didn't flinch. I'd seen worse threats come across my desk in custody battles, but this wasn't a client's ex-husband with anger issues. This was someone who had already taken something from me, and they were stupid enough to leave a trail. I called Gina. She told me not to panic, but also not to ignore it. "It's not a coincidence," she said. "You're closing in, and they know it." The next day, it escalated. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think law books will save you? We handle things differently here." Attached was a blurry photo. My daughter's elementary school, taken from across the street. That stopped me cold. For 10 full seconds, I forgot how to breathe. Then instinct kicked in. I screenshot the message, forwarded it to Gina, and called the sheriff's department. Within the hour, a deputy was at my door, taking my statement. I gave them everything. the envelope, the number, the screenshot, and a list of every known associate of the HOA's preferred landscaping company, Greenleaf Environmental Services. Turns out one of their part-time contractors, Troy Wilson, had a record. Nothing major, just enough to raise red flags: disorderly conduct, vandalism, and a prior restraining order from an ex-girlfriend who claimed he didn't like hearing no. He also matched the general build of the man from the night footage. And the tattoo on his neck, a snake. Henry hadn't imagined it. The sheriff's office pinged the number, burn phone, but they managed to trace it to a cell tower just west of the HOA clubhouse. That, plus the school photo and his proximity to the known site of the arson, was enough to bring him in for questioning. According to the report I got later, Troy didn't last long under pressure. He admitted to being hired to clear debris from an abandoned boathouse by someone high up in the HOA, claimed he didn't know it was illegal, said he'd been told the cameras were fake, and that the guy living there was planning to sell anyway. When asked why he sent threatening messages, he said, "I was just trying to scare him off. They said he'd fold. They didn't know me." Once the report hit Gina's desk, she amended our civil suit to include intimidation of a private citizen and witness tampering. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office opened a second criminal case for harassment with intent to influence legal action. Karen hadn't just crossed the line anymore. She had bulldozed through it, dragging hired muscle and intimidation tactics behind her like a flaming parade float. And now the law was watching. Courtrooms have a scent: stale paper, anxiety, and bad coffee. I'd been in dozens before, but never as a plaintiff. Never as the guy standing at the center of it all with everything to lose and no one to blame but the people who lived across the street in matching cardigans. Gina sat next to me at the plaintiff's table, calm and laser-focused, a folder the size of a phone book in front of her. Across the aisle sat Karen, clad in ivory like she was heading to a garden party, flanked by two HOA attorneys who looked like they'd been carved from petrified wood. She wouldn't look at me. The judge, a woman in her 60s with the no-nonsense tone of someone who'd raised 3 sons and sentenced twice as many idiots, called us to order. The trial was open to the public. I recognized a few neighbors in the benches, some wide-eyed, some pretending not to know why they were there. Gina opened with precision. She laid out our timeline with brutal clarity: the denied expansion request, the unexplained appearance of HOA contractors near private property, the fire, the footage, the threats. No drama, no theatrics, just fact after fact stacked like bricks in a wall no HOA lawyer could climb. Then came the exhibits. First, the video stills. 2 men approaching my boathouse at 3:12 a.m. carrying canisters. One wore a shirt with the Greenleaf logo, then the photos Henry had taken, time-stamped, clear and damning, showing the same men and the HOA-branded utility van. We brought Henry in as a witness. He testified with the dry bluntness of a man who'd seen too many people lie to be impressed by Karen's theatrics. They were creeping, he said flatly. Didn't act like they belonged. Next came the fire chief. He confirmed no electrical source existed at the boathouse. The pattern of the burn. Accelerated ignition, almost certainly chemical. He didn't use the word arson, but he didn't need to. Then we played the recording, the one from my porch when Karen muttered, "Should have just handled it the first time." Her lawyer objected. The judge overruled. The words echoed across the courtroom like a nail into soft wood. Finally, the crown jewel, Troy Wilson. Under subpoena, and facing separate charges of his own, he gave a deposition that connected the dots in permanent ink. He named Karen directly, claimed she'd instructed him to clean up the property, assured him it was HOA jurisdiction, and offered him under-the-table pay for keeping it quiet. He admitted to sending the threats, said he was told the guy wouldn't fight back. The courtroom went still. Karen looked like a ghost in a country club dress. Her lawyers tried to argue rogue actors, miscommunication, isolated misunderstanding, but they couldn't explain away the trail of documents, the jurisdiction maps, the historical deed, or the HOA meeting notes where Karen said Parcel B would no longer be an issue by summer. I didn't testify. I didn't need to. Everything I needed to say had already burned once. Now it was their turn to feel the heat. I showed up to court that morning with no expectations. I wasn't there for revenge or vindication. I just wanted the truth on the record, in ink and under seal, something HOA couldn't whitewash in a neighborhood newsletter or bury behind policy revisions. The courtroom was quiet as the judge read through her decision. No theatrics. No gavel banging, just calm, deliberate condemnation that hit harder than any scream could. The court finds that the actions of the Greystone Shores Homeowners Association, its president Karen Delaney, and associates acting under its implied authority constituted willful and malicious destruction of private property. The structure in question was not within HOA jurisdiction, was historically designated, and its owner had expressly denied integration into HOA governance. Her words didn't stop there. The defendants are further found to have engaged in coordinated efforts to suppress investigation, intimidate the plaintiff, and obstruct legal recourse in violation of multiple state statutes. Karen sat frozen, lips pressed into a thin white line. One of her attorneys leaned forward like he might faint. The other kept scribbling into a legal pad, like that would somehow soften the blow. Then came sentencing. Karen and two of her accomplices, Troy Wilson and another Greenleaf contractor, were sentenced to 6 years in state prison with no possibility of early release for the first 3. Their charges ranged from conspiracy to commit arson to intimidation of a private citizen. Troy barely looked up when they cuffed him. Karen did, straight at me. I met her stare with nothing but silence. The HOA, as an entity, was fined $980,000 in civil damages, property destruction, emotional distress, punitive damages, and mandatory reconstruction of the boathouse under county oversight. Their insurance company tried to argue acts beyond the scope of official duty, but the judge wasn't having it. They also lost their federal HOA accreditation for 5 years. Not that it mattered. The second the verdict was handed down, half the board resigned. The other half released a statement within 24 hours claiming ignorance and complete disapproval of the former leadership's actions. Yeah, sure. That week, news vans lined the main road into Greystone. My phone rang nonstop. Local reporters, legal analysts, even a podcast host who wanted to call the story the HOA that went too far. I ignored most of them. I didn't need fame. I needed peace. The sheriff's department set up patrols around the neighborhood for a few weeks, just in case some leftover board member got creative. But nothing happened. For the first time in a long while, things were quiet. Gina sent me a bottle of bourbon with a card that read, "When they go low, we go legal." I laughed for the first time in weeks. The settlement funds hit my account. I didn't touch them right away. I had one more thing to do before the final chapter could be written. They'd taken a piece of my family's legacy. Now, by law, they were going to help me rebuild it. 1 year later, I stood on the newly rebuilt dock, holding a cup of black coffee in one hand and the original fire-scorched porch swing chain in the other. It had taken months of supervision, 3 rounds of inspection, and a legal team breathing down HOA's neck to get it done right. But they'd done it. The boathouse was back. Same cedar siding. Same roofline my grandfather sketched on the back of a diner napkin in 1965. They even matched the chipped green paint on the shutters, down to the flake. I insisted they recreate everything exactly. Not out of spite, okay, maybe a little, but because I wanted this to be more than reconstruction. I wanted restoration. This place wasn't just walls and floorboards, it was memories. The smell of lake water and old wood. The sound of my dad teaching me how to tie a cleat hitch. The sunburns, the mosquito bites, the silence at sunrise. They'd tried to burn that out of existence. They failed. I installed new security, cameras, motion sensors, solar-powered floodlights, redundant backups, off-site cloud. I wasn't paranoid. I was experienced. The sign at the edge of the dock said it plainly. Private property, historic family site. Next person who touches it answers to a lawyer. People started treating it differently, too. A few of the neighbors, the ones who used to side-eye me at HOA meetings, now waved. Jake helped replant some shrubs around the new patio. Henry came by with his camera and gave me a printed photo of the sunrise over the rebuilt roofline. He said it felt right again. The local paper did a follow-up story titled "Justice at the Lake." It ran on the front page for a week. Not because of me, because of what it meant. People were sick of HOAs acting like feudal landlords. My case wasn't the first, but it became the one that stuck. A few months after the verdict, a group of lakeside residents formed an independent alliance, a network of property owners outside HOA boundaries who wanted shared legal representation and resources. I didn't found it, but they asked me to speak at the first meeting. I declined, sent a bottle of wine and a copy of the deed instead. Let the next poor soul who gets threatened know they aren't alone. Sometimes I still think about Karen. She's about halfway through her sentence now. I imagine her fuming in a beige jumpsuit every time someone mentions my name. Good. She deserves to sit with it. With the knowledge that her empire collapsed because she thought one stubborn landowner wouldn't fight back. She was wrong. My daughter painted a sign last week, hand lettering in bold red. Hudson Boathouse, Est. 1965, burn it down, we'll build it better. It's nailed to the front door now. And damn if she didn't get it exactly right.